All right, so today we're diving deep into Amazon Mechanical Turk.
MTurk.
MTurk, yeah. It's that online platform where,
Well, people can get paid to do little tasks.
exactly, and you might not realize that
It's actually become really popular with researchers, especially in management.
it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Now, we're basing this deep dive on a 2021 paper.
By Guinness, Villamore, and Ramani.
Yeah, and they found this amazing stat,
The use of MTurk in management research, it just skyrocketed.
like by how much?
Over 2,117% between 2012 and 2019.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It is.
So what is it about MTurk that's drawing researchers in?
Well, think about it. You're a researcher, right? And you need data from like hundreds or even thousands of people.
Yeah, the more the merrier?
Traditionally, that could take forever, months, years even, and it would cost a fortune.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
But with MTurk, you can potentially get that data within hours
Seriously.
and save a ton of money.
Okay, speed and affordability, I get it. But what about the quality of the data? Is this a random sample of people we're talking about?
Well, that's where things get interesting. See, MTurk gives you access to a way bigger pool of participants
Bigger than what?
than what you'd usually find at, say, a university. It's not just college students anymore.
So you're saying you get a broader range of people.
Exactly. People of all ages, backgrounds, work experience, you name it. But
There's a but.
there's always a but, right?
Right.
So while MTurk has this amazing diversity and reach, there are some serious concerns about data validity.
Oh.
Guinness and his colleagues actually highlight 10 key concerns, and we should, talk about those.
10? Okay, well, let's start unpacking this.
Yeah.
What's the first one? What's the first big challenge?
Inattention.
Inattention.
Yeah.
So you're saying people are just clicking through without really paying attention.
It happens. I mean, think about it. MTurkers are doing these tasks for, like, a small fee.
Yeah, they're trying to make some money.
Right, so it's only natural to want to rush through as many as possible to earn more, right?
Makes sense. So how do researchers even know if they're getting good data? Like, how can you be sure if people aren't paying attention?
Well, that's a really good question. And it gets even trickier when you think about this next challenge, self-misrepresentation.
Ooh, self-misrepresentation. That sounds a little, like lying.
Basically, yeah. To qualify for certain studies, some MTurkers, well, they might stretch the truth a little.
About what?
Oh, things like their age, income, education, even their gender.
Wow. To get into the study.
Into the study.
So we've got people not paying attention, maybe even lying. Doesn't sound too promising. Is there any way to, like, control for this?
Well, there are some techniques, sure, but they're not, foolproof. It really raises this fundamental question. If you're not even sure who your participants are or how seriously they're taking the task.
And how can you trust the results, right?
Exactly.
So it's like this incredible opportunity.
With this built-in uncertainty?
Yeah, like a shiny new tool that might not be as accurate as you'd hope.
A good analogy.
So what's the takeaway here?
Researchers need to be really upfront about these limitations and take steps to address them,
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got inattention, self-misrepresentation. What other challenges do we need to be aware of?
All right, well, this one can be tricky. It's called self-selection bias.
Self-selection.
Yeah. Remember, people choose to be MTurkers. They're not randomly selected.
Right.
So those who choose to participate might have certain, I guess you could say, tendencies.
That could skew the results.
Exactly. So, for example, maybe people who are more comfortable with technology.
Or who really need the money.
Right. They might be more likely to be MTurkers, but that doesn't mean they represent the general population.
Okay, so we're adding self-selection bias to the list. What else?
Another big one is attrition. People dropping out of studies before finishing.
Why? Why would they do that?
Well, MTurkers are often trying to, maximize their earnings, right?
Right.
So if a study looks long or complicated, or the pay isn't great.
They might just say, forget it.
Exactly. And we see higher attrition rates on MTurk than with other research methods.
So it's not even that they're bored, they're just like...
Trying to be efficient.
Yeah.
But then it makes you wonder, are the people who drop out different from those who stay in?
That's a good point. So we've got inattention, self-misrepresentation, self-selection bias, high attrition rates. Starting to think maybe this MTurk thing isn't as great as it first seemed.
I wouldn't go that far, but it's definitely more complex than it looks.
And we're only halfway through the list.
We are. 5 more challenges to go.
Okay, well, let's keep going then. What's next?
So number 5 on our list, it's all about the global nature of MTurk. We're talking inconsistent English fluency.
Oh, right. MTurk is open to anyone, anywhere. So not every participant will be a native English speaker.
Exactly. And that can really affect how well they understand things, like instructions or questions, even the whole point of the study.
Especially if the research is super complex or uses really specific wording.
Right, exactly. Now, let's say someone's doing a ton of studies on MTurk. They kind of become like a pro.
A pro MTurker, is that really a thing?
Oh, yeah. Some people do so many studies that they start to figure out the patterns.
Yeah.
They can guess what the researcher is looking for or even share information with other MTurkers online.
So it's like they're gaming the system a bit?
Kind of. It's called non-naivete, and it's a real challenge for researchers. And it's tied to this whole thing with MTurker communities online.
Like they have their own little clubs?
Pretty much, they talk about their experiences, share info about certain studies, even about which researchers pay well.
Wow. So it's like an underground network for MTurkers. That's kind of cool, but also like makes you wonder about the data.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity.
And speaking of things that could mess with the data, what about bots?
Ah, yes, bots. Those are the programs designed to, cheat the system.
Complete tasks automatically, I'm guessing.
Exactly. It's a concern because, well, we don't really know how much of the data out there is from real people versus bots.
So you're saying there could be a lot of fake data floating around?
Potentially. And then, of course, there are the ethical issues to consider.
Oh, right, right. We can't forget that MTurkers are real people, and we need to treat them fairly.
Absolutely. They're putting in their time and effort, so we need to make sure it's a fair exchange.
What are some, red flags that might signal a researcher isn't treating MTurkers right?
Well, offering super low pay for a really complicated task is a big one. That just feels exploitative.
Definitely.
What else? Being vague about the study, like not saying how long it'll really take, or rejecting work without a good reason.
Yeah, that would be frustrating.
Totally. It's like any job, really good communication, fair pay, and basic respect are important.
And if those things are missing, people talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Word spreads fast online, especially in communities like this.
So a bad experience with one researcher could ruin it for others.
It could. It's called perceived researcher unfairness, and it can have real consequences.
Okay, so back to the data itself. We got to talk about social desirability bias.
Ah, yes, the classic tendency to give answers that make you look good.
Or that you think the researcher wants to hear.
Exactly. And on MTurk, where people are working for payment, that bias can be, even stronger.
So how do you get around that? How do you get people to be honest?
One way is to make the surveys less about right and wrong answers.
And more about, individual opinions?
Right. And sometimes guaranteeing anonymity helps people feel more comfortable.
So they can be more truthful.
Exactly. Now, there's this other type of perceived unfairness, but from the researcher side.
Oh, interesting. So, researchers being biased against MTurk or MTurkers.
It's not always intentional, but it can definitely happen.
In what ways? How would that even play out in a study?
Well, some researchers might think that all MTurkers are just there for the quick buck.
Yeah, that they're not really invested in the research itself.
Exactly. So they might not take theta as seriously.
Dismissing their responses because they're getting paid for it.
Right. But it's important to remember that MTurkers, well, they're a pretty diverse group.
With different reasons for being there.
Yeah, exactly. Some might be super interested in helping with research, while others might just want to, learn something new.
So it's about recognizing that not all MTurkers are the same.
Exactly. And this kind of brings us to the big question, can we even trust MTurk data at all?
I mean, after hearing about all these challenges, it's hard not to be skeptical, right?
Totally. But I wouldn't say we should just abandon it altogether.
So MTurk's not, completely useless.
No, not at all. It's still a really powerful tool. But it requires a careful eye, both from the researchers and the people interpreting the results.
So how do we know if a study using MTurk is, trustworthy? What should we look for?
Transparency is key. Did the researchers talk about the limitations of MTurk? Did they explain how they tried to control for things like inattention, bots, those sorts of things?
So it's not just about the findings, it's also about the process.
Exactly. And be wary of results that seem, a little too perfect if a study's making big claims but doesn't address the potential issues with MTurk.
That's a red flag.
Definitely. Now, the good news is Guinness and his colleagues don't just point out the problems. They actually offer some advice for researchers.
Like a how-to guide for using MTurk responsibly.
You could say that. One key suggestion is to really think about whether MTurk is the right tool in the first place.
Yeah, don't just use it because it's convenient. Make sure it fits the research question.
Exactly. And then if you do decide to use MTurk, the design of the study is super important. Clear instructions, fair pay, being honest about the time commitment, those sorts of things.
So basically treating MTurkers with respect.
Exactly. And there are also techniques researchers can use, like attention checks, bot detection, careful data screening. All those things can help improve the quality of the data.
So it's about being proactive and trying to address those inherent challenges.
Right. And finally, researchers need to be transparent about their methods and their findings when they publish their research.
So other people can understand how the data is collected and analyzed.
Exactly. That openness is really important for building trust and helping people evaluate the research.
It sounds like MTurk can be a valuable tool, but it's definitely not a magic bullet.
That's a good way to put it.
So what's the big takeaway here? What do we want our listeners to remember about MTurk?
I think the main point is this. MTurk has a lot of potential. It can really speed up research and make it more accessible.
But it needs to be used carefully and thoughtfully.
Exactly. We need to be aware of the limitations and take steps to address them.
And as MTurk continues to evolve, it's important to stay up to date on the best practices, the ethical considerations, all of that.
Absolutely. The future of research depends on our ability to use these new technologies responsibly.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into MTurk.
I hope it was helpful.
I think it was really insightful. We've covered a lot of ground today. Thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world of knowledge. Until next time,